a friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Video 648. That in that neighborhood. My brothers and sisters. Happy Thanksgiving to all y'all out there that celebrated being team. I hope y'all eat some good food out there today. I hope you enjoy your family and friends out there today. And I'm glad that you came on back to the channel once again to F with the Bean today. And today is a very special Thanksgiving because we get to go back to the man. We get to go back to the myth. We get to go back to the legend, MrBallen. Back to MrBallen, y'all. And I cannot remember the last time that MrBallen actually put out a video during the week, but he has done it, and we're about to get into it. And the title of it is, this is the scariest basement story you will ever hear. Sound like we got a what the is going on type of basement story on our hand being team, and I'm excited to get into it. But before we get into it, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need, please. We are back to MrBallen on Thanksgiving. Y'all got what y'all need. Y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
Okay, we just wrapped up the 15 city live tour. Like literally, this is my first day back in the studio. The tour was amazing, really. It was awesome. It was so good to meet the fans of The Strange, Dark, and Mysterious in person. That was really cool. But I knew there was one story I had to tell. First off, once I got back in the studio, and it's the one I'm doing right now. It is the final story from the set list from the tour. So if you didn't see the tour, well, you're in luck. You're seeing the best story of the tour. Now, technically, we briefly covered this story like 4.5 years ago. However, it was terrible. I went back and looked at this video, and it was just poorly put together. It's like really short, and so many of the key parts of the story were just omitted because I didn't know what I was doing. But now I sort of do, and this story was completely broken down, restructured, rewritten, and the end result is this totally horrifying, like, encore story from the live tour that I really think, even if you've heard the OG before, you're gonna love this one. This one, by far, got the biggest reaction from the thousands and thousands of people that watched this live. Okay, so this is called What's in the Basement, and it's really good. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of The Strange, Dark, and Mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please tell the like button you're going to gift them tickets to my first ever live storytelling tour. But don't tell them you got them tickets that are mid-row floor seats to the Indianapolis show. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. In the fall of 1986, Frank Bowen, along with his two daughters, Tina, who was 15, and Karen, who was 9, they experienced just a terrible loss. So Frank's wife and the girl's mother suddenly passed away from cancer. And so that in and of itself was obviously tragic and terrible. But what made it even worse is that, you know, she had been a working mom and her income was a vital part of just making ends meet in the Bowen household. And so as soon as she passed away, as much as Frank just wanted to be there for his girls to help them grieve the loss of their mother, he really couldn't. He started immediately having to pick up all these late night shifts at his job, again, just to make sure financially the family was whole. And so it's like within days of the mother passing away, Frank is out late at work, and these two poor girls are just stuck at home by themselves, just totally grief-stricken and alone. And so in October of that year, on one of those nights where Tina and Karen were home alone and their dad was out working late, these girls, I mean, you gotta remember, they desperately miss their mother. All they want is to just have one more interaction with her. I mean, they can't believe that she's gone. They were so close with her. It's like their whole lives have been turned upside down. And so on this night that they're home alone, putting themselves to bed, they start talking about how, man, I just wish there was just a way to communicate with mom. And at some point, one of the girls says, wait a minute, maybe there is a way to do that. So the girls owned a Ouija board, and a Ouija board is basically a way people believe they can speak to the dead. It looks sort of like a game board. It's got letters and numbers on it, and it's got a yes and a no on there. And there's this thing called a planchette, which is basically like this little free-floating dial, almost like a pointer that you can place on the board. And people that use the Ouija board will place their fingertips right on the edge of the planchette. And they will literally just say things like, if there are spirits in the room with me right now, give me a sign. And in theory, if there are, the spirits will move the planchette around so that people have their fingertips on it, but they're not controlling it, and it will move around the board and land on yes or no, or spell things out or give numbers. It's just a way people believe they can speak to the dead. And so Karen and Tina are like, why don't we get our Ouija board out and have a seance? Let's try to communicate with mom and see if she manipulates the board and gives us a sign that she's here with us. And so Tina and Karen, they get their Ouija board, they go down into the basement of their house, they lay it out, and they put their fingers on the planchette. And after a minute, one of the girls is like, hey mom, are you here with us right now? And they have their fingers on the planchette, but nothing happens. So again, the girls kind of wait a minute, and they try again. Mom, if you're here with us right now, please, anything, just move it even a little bit. Show us you're here with us right now. Nothing happens. And so over and over and over again for over an hour, the girls just sit there asking every combination of question they can possibly think of to try to elicit a response from their mother, who they so want to believe is like with them right now, sort of looking out for them. But no matter how earnestly and passionately they asked these questions, the planchette never moved. So the seance didn't work. And so the girls, it's not clear if they literally believed they were actually going to get a reaction from their mom. But, this was pretty disappointing. It was like another reminder that, mom really is gone.
Yep, that's what it really was to them. That was just another reminder, like that reality kicking in, like there is no way we can ever reach our mama again, not even through the spirit world or whatever, so to speak. And me personally, I don't even believe in Ouija boards. I believe in spirits. I believe in the paranormal, but I don't think that Ouija boards are real. But it is just like another just heartbreaking moment for them to just sit right there like, man, we can't even talk to mama through the freaking Ouija board. You know what I'm saying, man? Any type of way we trying to communicate to her, she is not talking back to us. She is really gone.
And so they packed up their Ouija board, very frustrated, and they went upstairs to their respective bedrooms on the second floor of the house. They climb into bed and they try to go to sleep. So their father is still out at work. He won't be home for some time, and the girls know this. They know that they are home alone until they fall asleep. And so they're laying in their bedrooms. It's totally dark, it's quiet, and as they're laying there, the girls begin to hear a tapping sound coming from somewhere in their house. Now, it was clear to them that the tapping was not coming from the floor of the house they were on. It was coming from somewhere either on the first floor or maybe down in the basement. But, at first, the tapping sounds didn't really alarm them at all. It just sort of sounded like, house sounds at night. The sound of machines whirring or clicking, or maybe branches outside striking the side of the house, or who knows what. But they seemed sort of like harmless sounds that you would expect at night. However, as the tapping sort of persisted, it wasn't really consistent tapping sound. It was more sporadic, but it was consistently sporadic. Like it was obvious whatever this was, it wasn't stopping. As that continued, the girls began to tune in more and more to it and started wondering, like, what is this? And at some point, the younger of the two girls, Karen, the 9-year-old, she started to get spooked. The sound was kind of freaking her out. And so she got out of her bed and she left her room. She goes down the hallway. She comes into Tina's bedroom and she goes up to her big sister and she's like, "Do you hear that tapping sound?" And Tina's like, "Yeah, what is that?" And so the two girls, they leave Tina's bedroom together. They go out into the hallway. They can still hear the tapping. It's kind of coming from downstairs somewhere. And the girls, they walk to the top of the stairs, basically looking down the stairwell that wraps down to the first floor. They can't see the first floor. They can only see, the halfway point, the landing. And they're hearing the tapping sound coming from somewhere down there. And the girls are just kind of listening, not really reacting. And at some point, one of the girls says, "Wait a minute. What if this tapping sound is Mom? What if the seance we did worked? What if she is here and now she's giving us a sign that she's with us right now? What if it's her?" And so feeling sort of excited all of a sudden, one of the girls just says, "Mom, is that you down there?" And
I don't think there's mama down there, man. I know y'all like, what if that's mama? What if the seance did work? The Ouija board did work. But what if that's goddamn somebody who done broken your damn house? You ever thought about that? And I know that these younger kids, so you know what I'm saying, they're going to be more gullible and they just lost their mama and they want to believe that mama is talking to them in some type of way. So I get it. But I'm just saying at the same time, especially the older sister, you got to think at some point, like, what if this somebody who done broken our freaking house?
Immediately there's a response. Tap, tap, tap. Something from downstairs is reacting to their question. And the girls are psyched. This is what they wanted when they did their seance. All they wanted was some interaction with their mother, and they think right now they're getting it. They're talking to their mom. And so after getting that tap, tap, tap response, one of the girls asks another question. "Mom, if it's really you, give us another sign. Really show it's you." Tap, tap, tap. Something for sure is interacting with them downstairs. And the girls 100% believe it's their mother. And again, they are thrilled. And so the girls, they start walking down the stairs, firing off more questions to their mom. And even though some of their questions weren't really yes or no questions, they would always get that sort of tap, tap, tap response. Like, again, something is interacting with them. And as they made their way down to the first floor and they're hearing this tapping and they're sort of following it around, it eventually brings them to the head of the stairs that leads down into the basement. And they open up the basement door and they're asking more questions. They're getting those tap responses and it's clearly coming from downstairs. And even though the girls are really excited, it's gotta be Mom, they weren't so confident that they were prepared to go down into the basement to follow after this tapping sound. So they sort of stopped at the top of the stairs, looking down into the basement. It's gotta be Mom, but it's still a little bit frightening to go down there. And so they stayed there right above the stairs, looking into the basement, just constantly asking questions and getting responses from down in the basement from Mom. It was great. And eventually, after, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it was, the tapping just stopped. The girls continued asking questions, but there was no longer any reaction from the basement. And so at that point, the girls, they're so excited. They really feel like they've been talking to their mom, and they're so jazzed up from this experience that they're like, we're not going to be able to sleep. And so the girls just stay awake in the kitchen until Frank comes home from work. And when Frank comes inside and he sees his girls are awake, it's like midnight or whatever it is, he's sort of surprised. But the girls rush up to him and they're like, "Dad, you wouldn't believe it. We had this seance and we heard this tapping sound and we know it was Mom. Mom is with us right now. We were talking to her." Now, Frank, he's totally caught off guard by what they're saying. But he also knows his girls, they're going through this horrible time in their lives. I mean, they've just lost their mother. He can't even imagine their level of grief. I mean, he's obviously grief-stricken, but this is their mom. And so he's seeing his girls for the first time in what feels like a long time, looking really happy and excited. And they're telling him that tapping sounds in the house are their mother. And so Frank, he's not going to pick holes in what they're doing. He's not going to question, what's actually happening in the house. Instead, as soon as they tell him all this stuff, he just goes, "You know what, girls? Of course your mom is here. Your mom will always be here. She will always be looking out for you. Your mom is with you right now in the house, I'm sure of it." And so the girls, they're so happy. Again, this was such an amazing experience. Their dad, he also agreed this is so good. And so the girls, they happily go upstairs to their bedrooms and they go to sleep.
And I just gotta say, man, I can't blame the dad for his response to them. You know what I'm saying? He didn't want to be a party pooper, so to speak. I think that's like the best terminology I can use, but I know y'all get what I'm saying. He didn't want to rain on their parade, you know what I'm saying? They got so much hope and thinking that they mama alive, and he ain't just want to shut it down like, no, mama gone. You know what I'm saying? He ain't want to crush their heart like that, because he know what they've been going through with losing their mama, and now they got hope she alive and they younger and all that. I get all that, but I'm saying all that to say this. I still would listen to them and realize that my daughters did hear something in his house. Like, I wouldn't take it as both of them are hallucinating or tripping or nothing. All I'm saying is, long story short, story long, before I go to sleep, I'm walking all the way through the house. I'm looking up on all the beds. I'm looking in all the bathrooms, moving the shower curtain. You know what I'm saying? I'm going down in the basement, checking the nicks and crannies. Like, I'm going to check the whole house out for myself to make sure ain't nobody in here. Because they think it might be mama, like I said, but it might be somebody else. That's the only thing. But I understand his response, though. Let's go.
And Frank, truthfully, after having this exchange with his daughters, didn't really think much of it. Again, he's sort of thinking that, there wasn't really tapping sounds coming from his deceased wife. This is just some coping mechanism that the girls are using to deal with this tragedy. And he thinks, you know what? It's healthy enough. It's making them happy. What's the big deal?
And see, I can understand that part, but I still feel like, bro, you still should go around the house and check, you know what I'm saying, just to make sure they wasn't tripping and thinking they hearing they mama, but it actually come out to be somebody else.
And so Frank, he goes to bed. Over the next few days, the tapping sounds in the house would continue. And they were no longer just coming from the basement. They were also coming from the kitchen. They were coming sometimes from the second floor. They were sort of coming from all over the house. But the girls were the only ones who could hear the sounds. Like, every time they'd hear the tapping, if their dad was home, they'd call him over, but Frank wouldn't hear anything. Now again, Frank doesn't really believe that there's actually tapping happening. He doesn't think this is actually real at all, but he's playing along with it because, his girls are happy, clearly this is their coping mechanism. And so again, Frank's not thinking much of it. It's harmless. The girls are frustrated that he can't hear it, but again, it's overall still a very good thing. It's mom. Mom is trying to communicate with them. However, after a few days, post-seance, as the tapping continued, the girls began to change their attitude about the tapping sounds. The first day and over those first few days, it really did feel like a good thing. This is mom. This is positive. This was definitely a good thing. But after about 72 hours, post-seance, the girls began to sort of feel frightened by the tapping. Because the tapping no longer was really just coming mostly from the basement. It now started coming almost exclusively from their bedrooms at night. So they'd be laying in bed and they'd hear, tapping underneath their beds. They'd hear tapping in their closets. And it was frightening. And they would call their dad in and he'd come into their bedrooms and he wouldn't find anything. But now, Frank, who previously had just sort of let this continue, this is his girl's coping mechanism for this terrible loss. Now he's seeing that his girls, they don't really think it's mom anymore. They don't know what this is. And it's also disrupting their sleep. And so now it's not a healthy thing anymore. This is a problem. Like, it's disrupting his girls' lives. And so Frank begins at this point, 3 days post-seance now, he begins telling his girls, like, hey, come on guys, there's nothing to be scared of here. These tapping sounds are just normal house sounds. You're overthinking it. Like, there's nothing that's gonna harm you in the house. Mom is definitely here looking out for you, but she's not making those tapping sounds. You gotta let this stuff go and just forget about this stuff. But the girls, they're like, Dad, we're not making the tapping sounds up. Just because you don't hear them does not mean they're not real. And they began to tell their dad, like, we think the seance worked, but we actually no longer think it's mom that's sort of come out of the seance. We think we unlocked a different spirit, an evil spirit. And now that evil spirit is haunting our house. So Frank, at this point, he's like, guys, that's not what's going on here. You really need to stop. Like, these tapping sounds are not real. They're in your head or they're normal. And so Frank and his daughters really began to fight over this because the girls, they know they're hearing sounds and Frank's like, I'm not. And so they're really starting to fight over it. The girls, they're getting more and more frightened just being in their house, in particular at night when these sounds would typically start. And so fast forward about a week after the seance, and now the girls really are so scared to be in their house because of this tapping, which they believe is now this evil spirit in their house. They're finding all sorts of excuses to just stay out of their house. Like when dad's at at work late. They're trying to stay at their friend's house and not be home because it was too frightening. And Frank, he's sort of at his wit's end with what to do with his girls, because now this thing that's going on in the house, this delusion, as he believed it was, that his girls were suffering from, it was really disruptive and unhealthy. And he began telling his girls, like, if you can't stop with this whole tapping delusion, you're going to have to go to grief counseling. Like, this is too much. And so, again, fast forward about a week here, and that's what's going on in the Bowen household. And on this particular day, the girls, Tina and Karen, they didn't have a place to go that night. They didn't have a friend who was available. And so they're home at their house alone. Frank's out for the night doing a late night shift. And the girls, they're in their kitchen just kind of hanging out. They're pretty anxious here. And they start to hear tapping sounds coming from the basement.
Man, I just gotta pause it real quick, y'all, and say that I gotta say, L dad, like seriously, man, your two daughters keep telling you over and over, and it ain't like it's just one of them where you can just write it off as one of them tripping, one of them hallucinating, just hearing things. Both of your daughters keep telling you all these days, up to a week, 7 days now, that they hearing these tapping sounds. It's starting to cause controversy in the house. You know what I'm saying? And they say they don't believe his mama no more. They think it's a demon. But I don't even think it's a demon. I think it's a human, y'all. Long story short, story long. I think it's a human in their walls doing this. Now, we have heard a story from MrBallen before. It's a story I remember. I can't remember nothing about it more than I remember that it was a family that had went on vacation. They came back from vacation, and the dude who had been staying in their house actually was at the front door when they tried to get back in. And he had been like watching them, and he was basically treating them like lab rats in their own house. He was studying them from the walls about how to kill them or something. It was crazy like that. Some of y'all know what the hell I'm talking about, man. But it go back to this, man. I believe it's somebody in their walls, and L dad, because you not listening to your daughters, man. You think they done went crazy, or you think they grieving that much, and I can understand that. I can understand you think they grieving over their mother, because of course they are. But if they just keep telling you over and over, and I gotta just bring up the point more than anything that it's two of them telling you. It ain't just one that keep telling you about this. I think he should have just been paying attention a little more, man. Investigating a little more. Like I said, the first night they told me that I ought to have been looking all around the damn house. I don't know. Let's go.
Now, by this point, the tapping sounds were so common that just hearing the tapping sounds was not like this horribly frightening thing. It was just sort of this very unsettling thing where nobody knew what they were. And again, the girls think it's something evil. But on this night that the girls are alone, dad's gone, Tina, the older of the two, she says to Karen, like, Dad doesn't believe us. He does not believe that there's tapping sounds in the house. And so we, right now, need to go down in the basement and investigate, because if we don't, no one's ever going to look into this. Like, nobody believes us. And Karen is horrified at the idea, Karen's the 9-year-old, of going down into the basement, to go see what this tapping is, but she doesn't want to be away from her sister, and so she's like, okay. And so Tina gets a knife from the kitchen, she goes to the door to the basement, Karen follows right behind her, and Tina, she opens up the door, and the two girls begin going down the steps. And once they get to the bottom of the steps and they're in the basement, it's just this kind of blank slate down there. There's a washing machine and a dryer, there's some boxes, but it's just sort of a dank, sort of open, nothing cellar down there. And the girls, when they got down there, they're looking for the origin of this tapping sound. And on some level, they expected to find something that was making these sounds, because they've been hearing these sounds. For them, it's not a delusion. Like, every time they hear these sounds, they are real to them. Just because their dad doesn't hear it does not mean it's not real to them. And if you look at the beginning, when they first started hearing the sounds, they thought it was their mom. And they never really fully investigated. They maybe didn't want to find out that, perhaps the tapping sound was, a washing machine or something, because that would destroy the illusion that it was their mom. So they never fully investigated then. And then the next few days after that, when it sort of transitioned and became a scary thing, the girls also never really investigated because it was scary now. They didn't want to know what was making this tapping sound. And so now here we are a week into this, and they've gone down into the basement where they've heard the tapping sounds, and they're like prepared to see something that is making this sound, because it's real for them. Like, maybe it's a raccoon or some animal that's gotten into their house, but there has to be something, because they hear these sounds. But now they're looking around this basement and there's nothing. There's nothing that could possibly be making this sound. And the girls are horrified. And so after being down there only for a couple of minutes, Tina, who's got the kitchen knife, she's like, Karen, let's get out of here. Like, this isn't right. Let's get out of here. And so the girls turn around and they begin going back up the steps. And as they do, they notice something on the stairway wall that they didn't see on the way down. Written in red on the wall are the words, I'm in your closet, come find me. And when the girls see that, they are horrified. And they sprint up the stairs, they bolt out of their house, they go to their neighbor's house, start banging on the neighbor's door. The neighbor comes to the door and he's like, what's going on? And the girls are like, oh my God, we had this seance, we've been hearing tapping in the walls, and now somebody's written on the walls, we don't know what's going on. And the neighbor is so confused, really doesn't understand what's happening. And he's like, look, girls, just come into my house, you're safe here, we'll wait for your dad to come home, he'll know what to do. And so the girls, they're hysterical. They go into the neighbor's house, they shut the door, and they wait. And then a little bit later, Frank Bowen, their dad, he comes home. The neighbor immediately flags him down and calls him over. And he's like, look, here's what happened. Your girls came over. They said, something about writing on the walls. I don't know. And Frank's like, okay, all right. And he tells his girls, like, look, stay here. You're safe here. I'll go check the house and make sure nobody's in there. Frank, at this point, in no way suspects that there's anything, evil or bad in his house. He thinks this is just a continuation of this delusion the girls are sort of acting out. And so Frank, alone, goes back to his house. He opens up the door, he goes inside, he searches the house, and he looks everywhere, but there's nobody in the house. He does find the writing in the stairwell going down to the basement. It does say, I'm in your closet, come find me. But it's written in ketchup. And so after, again, searching the whole house and finding nothing other than this writing, Frank goes back over to the neighbor's house and he talks to his girls, and he's not mad at them. In some ways, he feels like all of this is basically his fault. Like, he should have handled this more aggressively at the beginning, and he let it get to this point. And so he tells his girls, like, look, I know that you wrote those words on the wall. I know that all of this is sort of a delusion that's playing out that started with, something good. You thought it was mom, but now it's become something that isn't good. It's disruptive. You've convinced yourself the house is haunted. And I'm very worried that this is a product of grief. Like, grief is leading you to do these things, and it needs to stop. And so starting tomorrow, you're going to go into grief counseling. We need professional help here to make sure you girls are taken care of. I should have done this.
Oh, hell no, y'all. You know who the delusional one in here? He think that they delusional, but he the one who delusional. You the one who not listening to your freaking kids, man. You the one who think that your damn kids will go as far as, okay, it's one thing for them to be saying the tapping thing, but you think they will be the ones who will write, I'm in your closet, on the wall with ketchup? You think they setting all that up, daddy? I'm telling y'all, man, dad starting to piss me off.
From the beginning, so we're going to make that happen right now. Now, the girls knew they didn't write that on the wall. They're not making the tapping sounds, but they also knew their dad 100% didn't believe them, like zero, and it was not going to change. And on some level, like, they think maybe there's truth to what he's saying. Maybe they are so grief-stricken that they've convinced themselves of things that are not real. And so in this sort of vulnerable moment where the girls are totally upset about what they've seen and what they've heard, they just tell their dad, like, fine, like, whatever, we'll go to grief counseling. And so sure enough, the next day, the girls would start grief counseling, and right away, all the tapping in the house, all the writing on the walls, all that stuff stopped. Like, peace returned to the Bowen household, at least at first. As you may already...
Now, MrBallen said that it stopped, and he is commercial. But he said that it stopped, but he said at least at first. But I wonder why it stopped anyway. You know what I'm saying? Why did it stop as soon as they start going to counseling? I'm still convinced that it's somebody in their home, y'all, inside the walls and ish. And I'm still just disappointed in the daddy, man. Like, you think they the one who delusional. You the one who being goddamn delusional, man. Like, your daughter's telling you over and over, and then the damn writing on the wall with the ketchup is just icing on the cake for me. I ain't gonna think two of my daughters. I get the situation about them losing their mama and grieving, but dude, they ain't gonna do all that, man. Like seriously, they not finna keep on going around here faking it like that. They telling you that they don't even think it's they mama no more. So we can not throw the whole mama part out, but you get what I'm saying, man. That ain't got nothing to do with it no more, daddy. We freaking scared around this mother because something's going on, and you need to pay attention instead of just thinking we going crazy when you the crazy one. Let's go, y'all.
The next time I go on tour. Happy holidays, everybody. Okay, back to the story.
Back to it.
Fast forward 3 weeks to December 8th, 1986. So this is 3 weeks after the girls began their therapy, and in those 3 weeks, the Bowen household is totally calm. There's no more tapping, nothing, everything is fine. But on December 8th, Frank, along with his two girls, Tina and Karen, and their friend, Kathleen, they had been out for the evening, maybe getting ice cream or going out to eat or whatever, and they come back to the Bowen household. And when they do, it's nighttime, so it's dark outside, and Frank, he goes up to the porch, he goes to the front door, and as he's about to open up the door, he looks through one of the windows of his house, and he sees there are several lights on in the house that he didn't remember leaving on before they left. And so he just thinks, like, that's weird. Like, I could have sworn I turned those lights off. He's kind of looking back at the girls right behind him, sort of wondering if maybe they left the lights on, but he's like, oh, that's weird. So he unlocks the front door, he swings the door open, and immediately he sees this scene inside of his house that makes no sense. The TV is on, a radio is on, and furniture in the first floor of the house where he's looking has clearly been moved. Not dramatically, but things have been moved around on the first floor. Like if you live somewhere, you know where things go. Things are off. And Frank, like he's seeing this, and he's sort of looking back at Tina and Karen, and he's like, did they do this? Are we back to this whole delusion? You gotta remember that even though it's been 3 weeks now of peace in the Bowen household, Frank is all too aware of how insane it was right before then. You know, with the girls, writing on the wall, at least according to him, and thinking there was an evil spirit in their house, and, he's thinking, is this them? Like, somehow did they do this? This feels sort of like a continuation of that. And he's looking at the girls, but he's thinking to himself, like, they've been with me. We've been out of the house. How could they do this? But again, Frank is sort of caught. On the one hand, he knows this could be his girls, but he's also thinking that's not possible. And so in that mind state of sort of being caught between these two opposing ideas, Frank, instead of backing out of the house and calling the police like anybody else would do, he instead just begins walking into the house, sort of nonchalant, not really sure how to react. And he begins this sort of half-cocked search through the house. And the whole time, Tina, Karen, and Kathleen, they see what's going on, and the two daughters, they're terrified. I mean, they're all too aware of all the tapping and the writing on the walls. They're thinking, this is real, it's happening again. And so they're tucked up right behind Frank, who again, Frank is in shock. He's just wandering through the house what's going on here? Turns the TV off, he's walking around, turns the radio off, he's moving furniture back around, and he can't believe it. And so he does this weird, again, half-invested search through the first floor. He doesn't find anybody there. He goes to the second floor, does the same search. Again, all three girls, the two daughters and the friend, they're right behind Frank because they're so scared. They do the search of the second floor, nobody there. They search the attic, nobody there either. They go down to the basement, nobody in the basement. There's nobody in the house. And so Frank is like, what is going on here? And then he remembers there's actually a room on the first floor of the house that he forgot to search. It was just a front room of the house right off the front entrance. When he began the search, he just sort of overlooked it because he was sort of in a daze. And so he's like, okay, I'll go back up there and I'll search that last room and then I'll know the whole house is secure. Nobody's here. And so Frank goes back up the basement stairs to the first floor. The girls are tucked up right behind him, still so scared. And he makes his way towards this room, and this room overlooks the front of the property. There are windows looking out to the road. It's just you walk in, there's windows, there's the front of the house, and there's a little closet over to the left. It's like a sitting room. And so Frank, he goes into this room, and right away, he sees on the wall right in front of him, written in shaving cream, are the words, "Marry me." And so Frank, he walks over to the words and he's staring at them being like, what is this? Who wrote this? The girls, again, are right behind him, tucked up against the back of his legs, and he's staring, And as he's doing that, he hears movement in the closet in the room that he's in.
Oh.
And Frank turns and he looks at this closet. The doors are open to this closet, but it's a dark closet. And out of the closet walks a man who was wearing a dress, Frank's dead wife's dress. This person had clown makeup on their face, and they were wielding a hatchet.
Oh!
And they walk out of the closet, and they look at Frank, and they look at the girls who are so shocked, they're just in silence staring back at the sky. And this person looks at Frank and goes, "You and the girls go upstairs."
I bet Frank ass realized they is real now. I bet you believe your goddamn 2 little daughters now, don't you, Frank? Look what the F you done got yourself into by you being the delusional one in this situation. I'm mad at him, y'all. I'm still peed off at him because we ain't even had to get to this point. Let's go. I hope they survive. I hope nobody died. Jesus Christ, Frank. You peed me off this story.
And so Frank immediately goes into protector mode, and he gets between the maniac and his girls, and he just tells the girls, like, go up the stairs, do what he says. And the hatchet-wielding maniac just sort of walks along, following after Frank and the girls. Again, Frank sort of staying between this person and the girls. And so Frank shepherds the girls up the stairs, and he's like, "Go ahead, girls. First bedroom, go in the first bedroom." So they go upstairs. All 3 girls go into the first bedroom. So Kathleen, Kara, and Tina. And then Frank, he goes into the bedroom, and the maniac's right here in the hallway about to follow after Frank. And as soon as Frank gets in the door, Frank shuts the door and holds it shut, and there's suddenly this struggle between the maniac in the hallway and Frank. The maniac's trying to get in, there's this vicious struggle, and Tina, who's already in this bedroom, just turns, runs, and leaps out the second floor window. And so she smashes to the ground, she runs next door to that neighbor's house, she slams on the door, the neighbor comes out, and Tina's screaming about, "There's someone in my house!" And so the neighbor at this point knows this is a real emergency, they call the police, and then minutes later, the police show up, and when they get there, they look up at the Bowen household, and Frank Bowen is leaning out of that second floor bedroom, and he's screaming to the police, "Hey, there's somebody in here. He was just at my door. He's gone. I don't know where he is." And police, they get over, they put a ladder up to the window. Frank comes down, they get the other 2 girls down, so everybody is safely out of the house now. They've been moved over to that neighbor's house, and now the police are going to go into the Bowen household to find this dress-wearing, hatchet-wielding, clown makeup-wearing maniac. They're going to find him and put him into custody. And so the police, they go into the Bowen household, guns drawn, and they search that entire property, top to bottom, and they find nothing. Nobody's there. The house is completely vacant. However, they would find a hatchet lying by the back sliding glass door, and the back sliding glass door was partially open. And so ultimately, again, when nobody is found inside the house, the police decide, well, clearly this maniac, if there really was a maniac, is now gone. Because look, the door's open, the hatchet's here, so they're gone. And so the police, they go over and talk to Frank and his family, and they're like, "Look, we don't really know what to make of this. We didn't actually see, this person you claim to have seen in your house. I'm sure there was somebody, but we didn't see them. And so for now, what we're going to do is we're going to monitor your property 24/7 and just see what happens, see if anybody comes in or out. We'll make sure nobody comes to this property. And we'll also begin an investigation in town to try to figure out, who this maniac was. And in the meantime, you and your girls go stay with a family friend or something. Just don't be here because we don't know what's going on here." And so Frank and his girls, they went and stayed with a family friend, and the police began their surveillance of the Bowen household. And for 2 days, nothing happened. Nobody went in or out of the Bowen household. And despite police canvassing the town and trying to figure out, who this maniac could have been, they really didn't get anywhere. Because remember, Frank's description and the girl's description of this maniac was, probably a man wearing a dress with clown makeup on. And so effectively, this person had a disguise on. There was nothing to go on. So they couldn't find anybody in town. There was no leads, and nobody has come to this house. And they're communicating with Frank Bowen the whole time. Basically, nothing's coming of this case. And so finally, 48 hours after, confronting this maniac in the closet, Frank and his girls, they've been at the family friend's house this whole time. And Frank's like, "You know what, it'd be great to get my toiletries and a few other things from my house," because basically they evacuated their house and didn't get a chance to pack or anything. And Frank's thinking, nothing's going on at the house. There's no leads in this case. It's got to be safe to go back to my house for a minute and get the things I need. And so he tells his girls to stay with his family friend, and Frank, by himself, goes over to his house, and it's broad daylight, and he's expecting to find a police officer, who's monitoring his property, and he can tell the officer, hey, I'm just going in real quick to get my stuff, and they would, let him go in and do that. But when he got to his house, he looked around, and he didn't see any police officer outside the property watching the property. And he's thinking, like, that's pretty weird. They told me they've been watching my property 24/7, like, where are they? But Frank's like, that's weird, whatever. So he gets out of his car and begins walking towards his front door. But as he's walking, for a second, out of the corner of his eye, he can swear he can see somebody moving in the second floor of his house. But when he looked up, nobody was there. But he was certain somebody had been moving around up there.
And that's when Frank, call the police and be like, what the hell y'all at? Y'all around here not even watching over my house, and guess what? That motherfucker back, and he on the second floor. I would have never went in the house myself. I would have just called them, told them like, man, y'all need to come back. And by the time they showed up, the damn dude probably would have been left again. This is freaking crazy. It's kind of like the cops didn't believe his story and the little girl's story, or they weren't taking it as that serious. It go back to how Frank wasn't taking it as serious when his daughter was telling them about they didn't even know it was a man. They just knew they was hearing taps and words being written on the wall and stuff. You know what I'm saying, man? But I don't think the cops was really taking this case too seriously. Ain't no telling. They probably was never monitoring his house like that. This is crazy, y'all. This is crazy.
He's thinking to himself, like, wait a minute. Are the police monitoring my house from the inside? Is that what they're doing? They've been in my house? I could have sworn they said they were out of my house. And Frank's like, you know what? Just in case, I need to call the police because I don't want to walk in there and startle an armed police officer who's basically looking for an intruder. And so Frank, he goes to that neighbor's house and uses their phone, and he calls the police, and he's like, hey, are you in my house? Is that what you guys have been doing? You've been monitoring my house from the inside? And they're like, no, we have been watching it from the outside. Very likely what's happened here is you've arrived at your house at the exact moment when there is turnover happening between the police officers who are watching it from the outside. Meaning the officer who's been watching your house must have just left, and the incoming officer who will be taking over the next shift is probably on their way, or maybe they're there right now. And in fact, what you should do, Frank, is hang up with us, go back to your property, and very likely the officer will be there or be there soon, and you can talk to them and have them search your house just in case to make sure nobody's in there. And so Frank says, okay, he hangs up the phone, he goes outside, and sure enough, now there is clearly a police officer in a car outside of his property.
Okay, maybe I was wrong about that, accusing the police of not even monitoring his house for real. Maybe they was just changing shifts. You know what I'm saying? But another thing that's in my brain right now, being seen, I'm wondering who the freak is this, and do they have any type of ties to this family? Like, do they know this family? Are they a relative of a friend or a friend or something? Like, why are they just wanting to be inside this house and live inside this house? You know what I'm saying? Who the freak is this, and why are you doing this?
So Frank goes over and, explains the situation to the officer, and the officer's like, no one's going inside your property. Literally, we have watched this property 24/7, save for a couple of minutes here and there when we're doing turnover, but nobody's gone in or out of your property. But either way, Frank, I'll search your house just to be sure. And so Frank goes back over to the neighbor's house, and this officer goes up to Frank's door. He opens it up, he looks inside, and he can't believe what he's looking at. In the first floor of Frank's house, it's just madness. There are pennies glued to the ceiling of the first floor, and the furniture clearly has been moved all over the place, but it's been stacked in these sort of weird arrangements. And there are glasses of champagne all over the first floor, and there are kitchen knives that have been driven into family photos on the wall. Like the knives are still sticking into the photo, and where these knives have been driven through the photo is always on a picture of either Tina or Karen, the two daughters. And where there are knives in these pictures, above those pictures is written, "I'm going to kill you, Tina," or "I'm going to kill you, Karen." And so this officer obviously knows, we have a problem here. And so he backs out of the house, He calls for reinforcements, and so all these officers go in, guns drawn, now convinced, clearly somebody has found a way to come in and out of this house, or they're still here, and we have to find them. Like, clearly, the Bowens were not lying about this horrible, maniac that they encountered in the second floor of their house when police first showed up. Clearly, that must have happened, because they didn't do this, somebody else did, and they gotta be here. And so police, they tear the Bowen household apart, looking for this maniac. They look everywhere, and they can't find anybody. There's nobody in the house. And on top of that, it had snowed outside, and before they went in, they made sure they walked around the property to see if there were footsteps coming in or out of the property, and there wasn't. Like, it's not possible what they're seeing. But they've now torn the house up, looking for anything, and they found nothing, other than, again, the madness they've seen with the furniture, the writing, the knives. That's all they've found. And so after hours and hours of this very frustrating search, a few of the officers found themselves in the basement, and they're just standing there talking to each other like, this is crazy. We must have missed something. Like, what is it? And at some point, one of those officers who was having that conversation, he had his hand resting on the washing machine, and he's just sitting there like, yeah, what did we miss? What did we miss? And suddenly, as he's leaning against the washing machine moved. And so suddenly there's this gap that's been created by moving the washing machine, and the officer looks at the wall where the machine had been sitting before, and clearly there is a hole on the wall. And the officer gets out his flashlight, and he looks in the wall and kind of scans down, and he sees there's this tunnel that's been burrowed in the wall of the basement, and it goes over to the corner, and looking back at this officer is Danny LaPlante. And he's crouched down, he's got a hatchet over his shoulder, he's wearing a dress, and he's staring back at this officer. I'm going to tell you about Danny LaPlante because this story takes a very dark turn. So Danny LaPlante was 16 years old at the time he was pulled out of the wall. And 6 months prior to being pulled out of the Bowen household's wall, Danny had had this very brief interaction with Tina Bowen, the 15-year-old. Apparently they went to school together or had some interaction in town, but Danny had sort of fallen in love or had some sort of romantic interest in Tina, and he felt like Tina had rejected him. Now, Tina did not remember any of this with Danny. This is entirely Danny's memory of what happened. But either way, 6 months earlier, when he had this sense of rejection from Tina, Danny responded to that by breaking into the Bowen household, cutting a hole in their walls, and burrowing tunnels in their walls. And for 6 months, Danny LaPlante lived in the Bowen household in their walls. Now, Danny was not able to access the entire house through the wall in the basement. He could basically maneuver in the basement and partially into the first floor, but in order to get to the other parts of the house, Danny had to leave the wall. And so routinely, over these 6 months that he was in their house, Danny would literally, while the family was home, just get out and wander through their house, like as the family is just living there, and they never noticed him. And so for 6 months, Danny spied on that family 24/7. And when
That is just crazy, man. That make me itch. Like, seriously. That get on my nerves, man, to just had the thought that, like, I'm in, it make me think right now, I'm in this room. It can be somebody walking through my goddamn house right now, and I don't even freaking know it, being team. And then they can go and climb back in the wall. That is freaking crazy, man. And I was wondering, I was like, is this, like, do this person, like, know one of the family members or something? And come to find out he did. And matter of fact, he fell in love with the little girl, and the little girl probably don't know him from a piece of shit. You know what I'm saying? But he just fell in love with her for 6 months, though, y'all. For 6 months, he had been in his house. That is crazy.
When the girls had that seance with the Ouija board to try to contact their mother, Danny was downstairs in the basement in the walls watching, and he saw an opportunity. He thought, I'm going to pretend to be their mother and screw with them. And so when they heard that tapping sound, that was Danny pretending to be their mom. He was absolutely trying to get them to believe their mother was here. But then whenever Frank was around, Danny would stop the tapping and sort of let Frank believe the girls were making it up. And then gradually, Danny sort of transitioned from it's your mom and it's good to actively trying to terrify the girls. He began tapping at all hours of the night. He began sneaking out of the wall, going upstairs to the girls' bedroom, flicking the undersides of their beds, going in their closet, tapping in their closet, and then making sure to be hidden or escape before Frank came in. I mean, this is absolutely psychotic behavior, but it gets worse. So Danny is taken out of the walls and he's arrested, but then 10 months later, when he is awaiting trial, Danny is released on bail. And while he is on bail, he would sneak into another family's house in Massachusetts, the Gustafsons' house, and unfortunately, that family would not escape Danny. Danny would murder 3 members of that family for really no particular reason. He just picked a family and killed them. And so,
see, now this just bullshit now. Cause why y'all even let him out on bond anyway? And that man went and did the same thing, and this time the family did not survive, or at least 3 of them. Rest in peace of those 3. But it's just like, come on, man, what are we doing? Why would y'all let a fucking psychotic maniac back on the streets like Danny out? What the hell are we doing?
So very likely, if Tina had not leapt out of the 2nd floor window when Danny revealed himself in that dress with the hatchet and got them to go up to that bedroom, if Tina hadn't leapt out and if Frank hadn't held off the door like that, almost certainly Danny was corralling that family into that room to kill them with the hatchet. But Tina basically saved their lives. As of this video, Danny LaPlante is still alive and he's serving multiple consecutive life sentences, and he actually recently was put up for parole. He didn't get it, he did not get parole, but during his hearing for his parole, when he was rejected, he was determined to be one of the most psychopathic inmates in the entire prison system. And now, here is a clip from the latest.
Man, oh man, Bean Team. I love to start it off when I get to the end of the video sometime with the man, oh man, when it freaking deserve it. And this video most definitely deserve it. Like, where do I even start with the craziness? I want to start with the part that got me peed the F off. Even though at the end, Danny end up being in prison for the rest of his life, and he got denied parole and all that. And I don't think he will ever get granted parole at no point in time. He gonna die in prison. But a big but is that y'all let this man get back out and y'all cause him to take 3 lives. Y'all are the reason that he end up ending 3 lives. Like, I just feel like, man, that's where we go back to all the technicalities of the judicial system and what you should be charged with and how many years and how long you should stay in prison. Should you be eligible for parole or bond and all that? Like, I feel like that man should, when he got locked up after we found out that this man, and I called it too, Bean Team. I'm like, man, this man, it's somebody living in the walls or something. Cause I done heard of MrBallen story like that before. Can't remember the name of it, but I already told y'all about it, and I'm pretty sure y'all know what I'm talking about. But it just reminded me of that, and I'm like, man, this ain't the mama, this ain't no demon, this ain't nothing. This somebody living in the walls. So for him to be living in these freaking walls of somebody's house for over 6 months, not only living in the walls, he actually getting out, walking through it, under the bed, playing with the, not even playing with the little girls, terrorizing them, in the closets, knocking. Like, this man been doing this for 6 freaking months. Not only did he do that, once Frank and the little girls Frank finally seen him. Frank a whole nother story that I can just go on a tangent about. Frank, man, come on, man, you got to be a better daddy than that, man. You got to listen to your little kids, man. Your little kids will tell you something now. Sometimes they might be talking crazy, but sometimes but more than sometimes they be telling the goddamn truth, especially when it's 2 of them talking to you. You need to listen to them. So just, hey, man, Frank, I ain't finna go on the tangent no more, y'all, but y'all know how I feel about Frank. But when Frank finally met up with what his name, Danny DeVito, I'm thinking about I'm seriously thinking about Nick Crowley video with DeVito. Y'all know the last one we watched. But I can't remember this man name. I think his name was David Planty. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The freaking killer psychopath mother. Once Frank actually encountered him with the little girls and stuff, and he had this hatchet, And that's proof enough that what the hell you think he was gonna do with that hatchet police if he would have got in that room with them. Shout out to Tina for jumping through the window and pretty much probably saving all their lives or some of their lives or something. But long story short, story long, Bean Team, all I'm saying is it was enough evidence to keep that man locked up, because you know more than likely if he get back out what he was gonna do. He was so freaking crazy with it to even after he knew the police was monitoring the house, he still was in the walls. He still was in his little cubby hole down in the basement behind the washing machine. He still was doing crazy-ish, like putting pendants on the ceiling and having knives stuck in the family pictures on the walls and stuff. Knowing that the police are outside monitoring his house. Knowing that all the people who live in the house, the two little girls and Frank, are gone. You know what I'm saying? So he ain't like you doing it to still scare them or nothing. This dude was just a freaking psychopath, man. Long story short, short story long. I don't know, y'all. I don't know. I'm gonna go let y'all go. How about that? How about I just go let y'all go back? I feel like I done talked enough about this one. I'll just say L Police and L Frank, and rest in peace. I'm not L Frank. L Police and L Frank. That's the daddy. And rest in peace to the 3 people in the other household that end up losing their lives because the freaking police ain't handled their business what they supposed to been did from the beginning. But I digress. Like I said, man, but go let y'all go. And before y'all leave, just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and do all that if you ain't did that yet. And remember this. Love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.